And as a government or a king or whatever I am, if I print more, me and my friends that get that money first, we're going to be able to benefit from that, because the peasants that get that money last, by the time it gets to them, their dollars are already going to be diluted.
Yeah.
But if I'm the king's friend, when he prints the new money and I get that new money, some of that new money first, then I can still buy things at the same price before it starts getting inflated by everyone with more money.
All right. Matt and Alex here with, technically it's called the Real Estate Podcast, but we got our good buddy, Lamar Cannon here. Thanks for coming on, man. It's always a pleasure to have you around. And I always like talking to you, and you always get me thinking. So appreciate you being here, dude.
Hey, I appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah. So what we kind of wanted to talk about is Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. You've been preaching on it for a long time to me personally. And actually, I think you're probably the first person that I talked about it with, that I was like, okay, if this guy believes in it, like he's a super smart guy, he knows what he's talking about. Maybe there's something a little bit more to this than what you're just hearing on like Yahoo News or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that was maybe 4 or 5 years ago, maybe not that long, but then you've obviously been in it a lot longer than that. And so we recently announced that like we are going to start accepting Bitcoin as rent, and we are investing in Bitcoin. And more and more over time, it just, to me personally, seems more obvious that like this is a huge movement and it's not going anywhere. Where I used to personally think, what is this? Is this like a tulip mania or something? And and it obviously has these huge swings and stuff, but it seems to be resilient. And so much more than we do about Bitcoin, and you're super plugged in, and I know you can get like super technical with it. But if it's cool with you, man, would love to kind of just, I guess, maybe start from like when you first got introduced to it and like what you see within Bitcoin, and we'll just pepper you with questions throughout. And kind of the concept is, how do we introduce this to more people, inspire entrepreneurs, get our message out about investing and thinking long term, which is real estate and crypto and Bitcoin. And if you're cool with that, man, just take the floor.
But
All right, that
before
sounds
we
good.
before we dive in too far into the Bitcoin conversation, I think it'd be really helpful if you could explain what cryptocurrencies are. Because I feel like, and I've done this on this podcast where I'm talking to people who are, talking about investing in crypto, and no one can really explain it very well. The blockchain and cryptos and, what it is. I think that'd be valuable too, so that people can follow based on that knowledge, what we're talking about here.
All right, sounds good. So in terms of starting with Alex's question, what is a cryptocurrency? And there's tons of cryptocurrencies that exist, and people make more every day. But if we're talking about in terms of the basic premise of cryptocurrency, which is why Bitcoin exists, is it's a solution to the problem of being able to exchange value without a middleman. And so if we can do that digitally, but we have to be able to do it in a way where Alex has a certain amount of money, he's going to send some to me, and then I'm going to send some to Matthew. But we have to do it in a way where Alex can't if Alex has $1 of cryptocurrency, he can't send me that $1 and then also send Matthew that $1, so he doubled the amount that he has. So the non-technical, simple explanation of what cryptocurrencies are is they're a shared ledger that keeps account balances, and basically that ledger updates every time a transaction is done. And so all the users on the Bitcoin network, the miners, the users, the different nodes, they all share the same ledger, which they update every time a transaction is done through whichever network they're on. And so keeping those balances updated is basically what needs to be done to make sure people aren't spending money that they don't have. And so that allows the currency to exist with no middleman.
Yeah,
That
and
makes
just to touch on that, I know this is going to be, we'll talk about this, I'm sure, later, but the middleman concept is fascinating to me because obviously, you know, one of the big things is the Federal Reserve, like printing money, and these people control, like, you know, interest rates and all this stuff. And Bitcoin, you know, I think the big core for me is it takes that out, and
Yeah.
it takes out artificially messing with it. And like the way I think about it as well is like different currencies and different governments and how they manipulate it in Mexico versus the USA versus France. How do you keep up with all this stuff? And like the people that aren't pulling the strings are the ones that get screwed over. And so you put it on where there's no middleman, or it's just nobody owns, you know, all the crypto or all Bitcoin, and making these decisions owned by everyone. And that's what's so inspiring to me about it.
Yeah.
But anyways, I'm sure that's a long discussion. But man, like you've been in the real estate business for a long time, and you're very passionate about crypto, and I believe Bitcoin specifically. If it's cool, like how'd you get introduced to it? Like, what was the first time you saw it, and then started getting you to dive in on it?
So basically, with that, I went to college for computer science because I felt like the future of the world was going to be a lot more digital than it was when I was in college, and I felt like that was the wave that we're going to go down. So I learned how to program, I learned how to do all kinds of stuff, and then I realized that I want to start businesses. So even though I started doing entrepreneurial things, I always kept doing like computer programming on the side. Even today, I was doing a little bit of writing some code, and so basically over time, what happened was in 2008, I think, when the market crashed, the stock market crashed, I lost pretty much my whole life savings that I saved up in college, and so I lost that, and well, not actually lost, but it went down, and I freaked out and sold it, and you know how that goes. So after that, like that was like '08, and then Bitcoin was created in '09. I didn't know about it, and then all the way until 2013, the only things I've heard about Bitcoin before that were coming from the media to me. So that was like, Bitcoin's for criminals. It's used to buy drugs. There's these weird, shady people online doing all this stuff with this magic internet money. So I was kind of curious, but I didn't really like dig deep into it. And it seemed like a criminal thing, so I didn't want to attract any kind of attention that way. And so I went to some real estate conference. We were working on starting a fund for real estate business to buy some deals. And I went to this conference, and then these, I thought at the time, these weird people showed up and started talking about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And it was so weird because it threw everyone off, and everyone was just like, why are these guys here? But they're talking about using cryptocurrency to using Bitcoin to raise money for real estate deals. And it didn't really go over well with the crowd, but I was kind of interested. And so they even spelled cryptocurrency wrong. They, instead of a Y in cryptocurrency, they put an I instead. So that was pretty funny. And so basically after that, I began looking into it. I got online, tried to buy some Ethereum, and it was like $16 at the time. I don't remember what year this was, but it was like super hard to buy, so I kind of brushed it off. But then they started having this ICO mania, where it's like initial coin offering, which is like kind of like you're raising money for some kind of cryptocurrency project that you're building, but you're raising it with Bitcoin. So everyone's donating Bitcoin to you to build your project, and then you give them tokens in exchange. So they're doing that on the Ethereum network, which is another cryptocurrency. So that's how I got into that. And then over time, I realized most of that was just gambling. So I ended up solidifying, after I learned about all the different cryptocurrencies. I spent time going through every single one of the top like 200 cryptocurrencies to see what the differences were and how they're different from Bitcoin. And in the end, I realized that Bitcoin is the the best chance for us to solve the money problem that we're trying to solve. And so if we're trying to build another Las Vegas, then the rest of the coins are pretty good for that. They can help us gamble. Sometimes we win money, sometimes we lose money. We can trade, we can do all kinds of stuff. We want to gamble, then the other coins, yeah, they're really good. But if we want to have a future where we have sound money, really hard money that no one can interfere with, no one can inflate, and basically like, if we talk to our grandparents and ask them how much things cost, and then we go try to buy the same thing right now, the price is totally different, much higher, and that's a result of inflation. And we've gotten so used to it, we expect the prices of things to go up over time. But if we had sound money, it would be much different than that. We wouldn't get taxed, like secretly taxed on our earnings, on our dollars, if they weren't inflated, and we didn't have someone in between that we had no say in if they inflate the money supply.
Yeah, that's deep, man. I mean, that's what's so cool about it is that it is trying to solve a problem. One thing that I want to ask you, which I've been thinking about a lot lately, is like I definitely believe in it, and I'm buying some, but it doesn't seem like it's succeeded, and I could be wrong, but succeeded in being a actual currency, but it's more succeeding in being that store of value. Is that correct, or am I looking at that wrong?
Yeah, so I agree. I agree somewhat. I agree to this point. Yes, I agree. So basically, the way money usually goes is something becomes a store of value before it's actually used as a currency to exchange. Because if that thing doesn't have the store of value first, then why am I going to want something that didn't have value before we start trading with it?
Right.
We're not just going to pick up something and say, hey, we're going to trade this, unless the government makes us, like we did with these pieces of paper that we use. And so, so basically, but Bitcoin has started trying to be a currency, and then over time it evolved into like a store of value. And then in the future, which is starting now, there will be stable coins pegged to the Bitcoin blockchain, which basically means it's a coin that stays at the same value, but it's backed by Bitcoin, and you can use those to transfer money between each other. And it'll be much easier than sending a Bitcoin across, because Bitcoin can only do 7 transactions per minute, I think. Yeah, and so so 7 transactions a minute, and so that's definitely not enough for the whole world to use for transactions. But you can build on top of Bitcoin, which solves that problem. And
Right.
so, yeah.
And that makes sense that like you can't use it as a currency right now as much if it's so volatile, right? Like you're like, well, I don't even know what it's going to be worth. And so I guess once it's more widely accepted, it's not going to have these massive swings as much as it's having now. And then people feel a little bit more reliant that like it's worth what it is right now. So I'll use it maybe.
Yeah, so right now Bitcoin's still like in a price discovery phase. And so right now it's like there's not like, so with a stock, with a stock or most commodities or most of the assets that have existed for most of our lives, Bitcoin is one of the newest assets that we've come across. Like, it's rare that a new asset gets created in someone's lifetime, and we're experiencing that with Bitcoin. And so 10 years ago, 11 years ago, a new asset was created. So the world doesn't really know how to react to a new asset, how to value it, how to price it correctly. And then so all the money that could be in Bitcoin is not in Bitcoin yet. All the money that wants to be in Bitcoin is not in Bitcoin yet. So a lot of the big pension funds haven't put their money in there. Some of the hedge funds and some publicly traded companies are in there, but it's kind of like a weird alternative asset that if something goes wrong and the price drops, you don't want to get fired, so you'd rather not take the risk. But eventually it's going to be something where it's like, why don't you have Bitcoin? Like it's going to be like a weird thing. So I always think of it as when smart people, especially smart rich people, are doing something that you think is weird, then it's probably not weird. You should probably look into it. And so there's been tons of smart people before, but before Elon Musk start buying Bitcoin, but there's been tons of smart people that have been buying it. And then so Elon starts buying it, and he gets people all hyped on it. And so I just think, like, if you have a publicly traded company and you buy billions of dollars of Bitcoin of certain asset with it, and you're one of the first publicly traded companies, that should probably tell people something, especially if you're considered to be one of the smartest people in the world. And another guy from MicroStrategy, Michael Saylor, he like buys Bitcoin like crazy, like hundreds of millions of dollars at a time with his publicly traded company and some bonds that he's selling to buy more Bitcoin. So it's just one of those things where if you look at any new technology, if you look at Apple Computer when it first started, if you look at Google when it first started, if you look at Facebook when it first started, like everything that when good ideas, when they first start, they sound kind of dumb to a normal person. And so a normal person that doesn't have that foresight for the future and see it, and they just see it as something that's different than what I'm used to, they always end up adopting it really late in terms of investment. So I don't know. I think, and then the other thing about it is, I think there's I think most of the money, the wealth in the United States or all throughout the world, I think naturally most of that wealth is in the hands of like older generations. And so that kind of makes sense because they have more time on earth to like amass wealth, and some of them amass quite a bit, like your Warren Buffetts and some other people like that. And so with most of that wealth being in older hands, the thing we have to realize is that after someone's over 40, it's really hard to change their mind about something. And so if someone isn't already an early adopter, or someone isn't already into something that's new, then at a certain point, they're never going to change their mind, and they're always going to think that thing is weird. So it happens with every generation, no matter what kind of technology it is, where they think that technology that the young kids are using is some weird, crazy thing. And so a perfect example is if you look at Nancy Pelosi, or you look at Janet Yellen, or some of these other people that they're a little bit up there in age. They don't really agree with this new technology that puts the power into the people's hands. And so I think the world will be much better if the power of money, like the thing that everyone on earth pretty much cares about and needs, if that can't be manipulated by very few people.
I've got a few questions, if I may.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the problem we're solving, the middleman being the government here, correct?
Correct.
So we're trying to remove the government from, or well, that's the problem that Bitcoin solves, or crypto solves, is having the open ledger for everybody. You know, everything is recorded. As soon as something happens, it transfers hands, and it's this open ledger. So it's really just a ledger. It's a universal spreadsheet that anybody can access and see what happened, when, and where. So what is the coin aspect of that ledger? The coin aspect is the digit that you're transferring. If that makes sense, like blockchain is the ledger or Bitcoin is the ledger.
Yeah. So wait, so are you asking me, is blockchain the ledger or Bitcoin the ledger?
Yes.
So
I don't get it. I get confused thinking about.
So you have the ledger part down, you have all that down, you're good with that part. And so the coin is just a representation of the balance. So it's not an actual coin, it's just me taking my balance of one coin and giving 0.5 of that, transferring 0.5 of that to your balance. So my balance goes down by 0.5, and now the ledger sees your balance up by 0.5.
And just to help maybe touch on this, like there there is a certain amount of coins that will ever be around. They're like, they all have not been mined yet. People are working on, there's like these
There's
formulas.
this unknown number of coins.
No, there
there's
is,
the
it's a,
maximum, the maximum is 21 million. So
There's
there
a
will never be
known-
more than 21 million coins. So
yeah.
you can't be, so if you have 1,000 coins, then you know that you have 1,000 out of the total supply, and you're not going to get diluted, and your money is not going to become worth less as a result of dilution.
Right.
It will never change.
Yeah,
And but they all haven't been unlocked yet.
I get it. And so that's where the value comes from, is this limited number of coins, digits on this, of this ledger. Who manages this ledger? Who's in charge of making sure the ledger? I mean, like I'm trying to wonder, like, who's managing it, who's overseeing it, what happens if the ledger malfunctions? Like, I thought that was the whole point of people mining them, was to keep it going or of some sort.
So all right, so we're so used to the business world, and like we grow up with everything having to be managed, and we need the government for everything. So when something's different like this, it kind of throws us off. Exactly the same thing that happened with me. And so basically no one manages the ledger because no one needs to. And so basically the way I'm trying to think of like a simple way to explain it without talking about like mempools and transactions and fees and mining and hashes and stuff like that. So basically the ledger, once the ledger, so as a miner, okay, so this is, we have to get semi-technical to
Let's
explain.
go.
Okay, so if I'm doing a transaction, so I do the transaction, it goes to the internet. So it goes through the internet and it waits. It goes to a place called a mempool. And so a mempool is just a holding place for all the transactions that haven't been processed yet. And then in that mempool of all those transactions, the miners pick from those transactions. They can pick whichever transactions they want in the order that they're supposed to be processed. They can pick those transactions. Usually they pick the ones that have the highest fees, so they can make the fees off that. And so they pick those transactions, and then they solve a really hard puzzle with their computers that allow them to win the transaction over all the other miners. And so what that does is it gives them all the fees, the mining fees for that transaction, which can be quite a bit. Right now it's like 6.25 Bitcoin per transaction. So that's quite a bit. And so basically that, and once a block is made, it kind of solidifies it into the ledger. So this can't change. And as more transactions are added on top of it, then it becomes even more solid. So as 6 more blocks, usually the general accepted amount of blocks where you can't change the ones that have been already completed is 6 blocks later. So after I mine this block and this block goes onto the blockchain, 6 blocks later, that's going to be pretty much set in stone, can never be changed. Before 6 blocks, there's like a really small possibility that this can get changed, but until like once 6 blocks happen, 6 confirmations, then that's set in stone. So basically the ledger is set in stone, and to do another transaction, my transactions have to be based on that existing ledger. So I can't work off the Bitcoin ledger if I'm using the wrong ledger. And so
Right.
everyone uses the most updated ledger. Otherwise, you're not on the Bitcoin network anymore. You're on your own imaginary thing that's not connected. No one's going to mine your transactions. And
Where is this ledger hosted? I mean, because like
it's on hundreds of thousands of computers all across the whole world.
But it's connected through some sort of
Connected through the internet.
Okay.
Just like websites are connected through the internet.
Right. And so it's
so-
connected through the internet. It's not like this ledger's on some server somewhere in some server warehouse.
Correct. It's not a centralized, it's decentralized. So there's so many copies of it all throughout the world that if I saw your node where you have your copy saved and I destroyed it, there would still be tons of other copies all throughout the world that have the most recent updated Bitcoin blockchain ledger on it.
What happens when, so it's 21 million, that's the number, right?
Yeah.
What happens when all 21 million have been mined? How does it continue to run and update if nobody's working to keep it going?
Yeah, so the miners are always going to be there working to keep it going. So right now, every time I mine a block as a miner, I get all the transaction fees. So when you do a transaction, you're sending Matt 10 Bitcoin, and then you're paying like 0.1 in transaction fees.
Got it.
And so the miner gets the 0.1 transaction fee, and then we send the rest to Matt.
Got it.
So right now, the miners get all those transaction fees from all the transactions in the block that they create. And then they also get what's called a block reward for being a miner. So right now the block reward is 6.25 Bitcoin. And so every 4 years that cuts in half, but right now it's 6.25 Bitcoin. And so if I'm a miner and I mine a block, I get 6.25 Bitcoin plus all the transaction fees. So in the future, when that block reward is gone, then I'm going to be getting mostly my income as a miner would be mostly transaction fees. Does that make sense?
It does. That makes sense.
Instead of the block reward and the transaction fees, I'm only getting the transaction fees.
That makes sense. I thought they did it only for the block reward.
Okay. Yeah. So if they did that only for the block reward and then the block reward went away and you have to just do it for free, no one would do it. And so it'll just be game over.
And so do you think that cause I've tried, I haven't dove too deep into it personally on my own research. I think I said it the other day. I said, personally, maybe I just stick to real estate. I'm not 40 years old yet. My mind can be changed. But I'm just trying to like think through it. So Bitcoin or a cryptocurrency, I guess this would be a global thing. This ledger, this wouldn't be United States, and then China would have their own, or so on and so forth. This would be a global way to trade and have it, be recorded and transfer, money and value. And so I imagine that what do you foresee? Because no middleman ever likes to be removed, right? So how do you foresee this playing out with the governments?
And I just want to touch on that because that's what I was thinking is like a huge part of this is like, this is a revolution, right? Like that people don't want to happen. And so that's like a whole dark side as far as like people wanting to keep this out and preventing it. And you're going against powerful people that have always had the power. And I think they're scared that some of that aspect would go away. And so that's fascinating to me as well. It's like, nobody can manipulate this. This isn't about one person or people that get in control. The miners are obviously very important, but they have a service to provide, which they get paid for.
Yeah.
But that seems, based on what you're saying, that's all they do. They provide a service. They're not making any kind of directional decisions. Correct. It seems like it's already set in stone. And so it's like a huge revolution financially. And, I know this is out there, but like with space travel and all this stuff, like the Bitcoin, all this stuff could correlate there directly. Like it's all still through the web and on the internet, and we're not going to have dollars in other other planets and stuff like that. And that's thousands of years away, but like, it's just a fascinating concept to think about. And all those are the reasons why I believe in it. But I guess to your question, you're like wondering how what are people going to do to prevent it?
Well, and I mean, Lamar, I mean, I guess I don't think anybody knows.
But do you know, real quick, do you know that like recently, and you could maybe know a lot more about this, but like in China, like they're kicking miners out, like, and that's like a big deal.
Yeah, but if I live in China, I could still do Bitcoin transaction. So no one can stop me from doing a Bitcoin transaction. Even if I don't have internet, I can do a Bitcoin transaction through a satellite. All I gotta do is get one of those dish network satellites, and give me like 2 hours, and I can do Bitcoin transactions through that. Because there's a satellite that I can connect to that I can send Bitcoin transactions to. So yes, you can make it harder for people to use it, but you can't stop people from using it. They can't even stop drugs from coming across the border. So how are you going to stop some invisible code from being transferred through the internet?
I don't know if that's intentional or not. I do have
a
government, by the way, just in case.
Yeah. So I have a question here about and I guess really the only thing I have to relate it to is the dollar or another currency. But so right now it's in price discovery phase, right? But like and I'm people do invest in currencies. However, I've never had the thought to invest in the dollar, right? I'm always trying to get rid of my dollars. I don't want to hold on to the dollars. We want to own assets. And so I'm trying to think of that in terms of Bitcoin. If it's in price discovery phase right now, eventually it would be stable. The only reason I would need a Bitcoin would be if that's what who I'm trying to do business with wants to trade with, right? And so I guess in the future, it's not necessarily going to be like it is now of, man, Bitcoin went up this morning it was up 6.7%. It's not going to be like that. It'll more just be like, all right, I got to go. Or, well, I guess maybe the whole world will just be operating on Bitcoin at that point, or I have to go trade in this for Bitcoin to be able to do this transaction. But it's not necessarily going to be like, all right, hopefully we go up 20% today.
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
So yeah, that's accurate. I think like over time it becomes more closer to gold than a dollar. So it becomes closer to like the use of gold. So right now you wouldn't buy gold if you're trying to like 10x your money. But there's a time when the Spanish pulled up to Colombia and they seen the native people wearing gold as part of their outfits, and they're wearing like gold skirts and gold necklaces and gold headdresses, and they wanted to gather all that gold because right at that time they realized that, I don't know if they realized this or not, but they had different values between them of the amount of worth of that gold. And so basically I think Bitcoin becomes more like a store of value, and then based on that store of value, the same way we did with gold, is there's things that we transfer that's backed by that store of value. So just like we had the gold backed dollar, well, the problems start happening when we went off of that hard money dollar and we just started inflating the money supply. So if you look at any currency in history, a currency that works the way our currency works is called a fiat currency. It's not backed by anything except the government's word or the Federal Reserve's word. If you look at all those throughout history, there's never been one that survived. They always go through this process where we're backed by something, then we're not backed by something. And since we're not backed by something, we can start printing more of it as a government. And as a government or a king or whatever I am, if I print more, me and my friends that get that money first, we're going to be able to benefit from that, because the peasants that get that money last, by the time it gets to them, their dollars are already going to be diluted.
Yeah.
But if I'm the king's friend, when he prints the new money and I get that new money, some of that new money first, then I can still buy things at the same price before it starts getting inflated by everyone with more money.
And yeah, and like I think COVID and the PPP stuff was a great example of that. Like, people that don't fully understand money were like, yeah, like give me those checks. And like, that's great. But they're actually not moving up the way the people that actually have assets and money are in this time period. Like
Yeah.
Bezos and whoever had millions of dollars gained a lot of ground in what happened. And meanwhile, people get a $600 check or $1,200 check and like feel like they're gaining ground, but really they're losing because
Yeah.
we're printing a ton of money. So dollar becomes worth less and assets go up.
Yeah.
And so it's like they've been tricked. And this prevents that. Like you can't go print a bunch more Bitcoin. There's a certain amount that can be there. And
Yeah.
it's fascinating the component of which I've heard people talk on, and maybe some more about this of like this is for the people. This is like actually potentially going to help people that are in poverty in the long run because they're not going to be manipulated like that, and they're going to have a much more fair chance at what is this thing, this currency or any kind of value that they have worth. Well, it's going to be ideally once price discovery is done the same and not less every day, and wealthy keep getting more wealthy.
Yeah. And I agree. And so like, let's put it this way. Let's say everyone, whoever's listening, we're talking about your grandma or your grandpa. So let's say your grandma or your grandpa, they just decide they're going to save their money for their whole life. So they're 20 years old, they start making money, they start saving it, they save it, they save it, they save it. And then so now they're 80 years old. And so they're 80 years old, they've been saving money for 60 years. And then that money that they're saving, it can't even buy a house. It can't even buy a whole house. And so at the time when they started saving that money, if they had that same amount, it would be able to buy quite a bit more. So basically their purchasing power got stripped from them from nothing of their own doing. Like, so I got like, what did I do to make my money that I want to save worth less? So instead I have to be like Alex and every other smart investor. Every time I get $1, I have to immediately put it into investment. Otherwise, my money is going to be worth a lot less. Judging from last year to this year, my money is worth 30% less. If I like buying houses, or if I like buying pretty much anything, then lumber, anything, then my money's worth 30% less. And so if I have no control or no idea of what's going to happen with the dollar and how much they're going to inflate it, and are they going to do 3 trillion again out of thin air, 2 trillion again out of thin air, 6 trillion out of thin air? Like trillion's not even it's like a freaking play number now. They're just throwing it around.
Yeah.
And so my thing is like, yes, the checks help people, and yes, people needed it, and yes, it helped people in that immediate situation. And so that's good. But my way of looking at it is like, if they're going to print money to solve problems, then if Matt, if you need to borrow money from me and I let you borrow the money, or I'll just say I'm giving you the money, but everything else that you buy for the rest of your life is more expensive, and you're going to be paying me back for the rest of your life. And
Right.
so even once you pay me back plus interest, you still got to keep paying me, because we did a deal that never ends. So like, and your kids, when you have kids, they got to pay me too, and your grandkids. And so that's basically the deal that we made. And so it's like, you want $1,200 so that your grandkids are going to have to pay for this later, and you're going to have to keep paying for it. And so, but I don't blame anyone, because when I say it seems like I'm saying like, oh, why'd you take this money? I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we didn't have really a choice in it. Even if every 100% of people, of the citizens, didn't want that to happen, it still would have happened. So there's nothing that we could have done. So the only thing that we can do is have a peaceful protest and buy assets that we think can solve this problem that's making us not be able to save our money.
Totally, man. And obviously, I think a lot of people know this, but the people that got the real money were the big corporations that got millions of dollars of PPP loans.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's a great way to put it, is like, it's it's great in the immediate moment, but ultimately it is going to hurt you and everyone else because it's meant to benefit the king and the king's friends.
Yeah.
With Bitcoin, due to the 21 million coin cap, well, first question, is this able to be verified? Like, is this somewhere in the network where like you as a miner or user, or you can somehow look at this and say, hey, the software, whatever the ledger says, it's only 21 million. Is that like able to be verified, or where
Yeah.
this?
So the cool thing about Bitcoin is one of the things that a lot of people say, one of the memes in Bitcoin is don't trust, verify. And so everything that we talk about in Bitcoin based on numbers or how something works, it can all be verified through the code. And so I'm like a skeptical person. So I had to learn some different things about code and some certain things about how Bitcoin works so that I could go in there and verify for myself that all those things that these nerds are saying is actually true. So I did that, and a lot of people have done that, and it's been around long enough that if any of those things were flaws, somebody would have pointed them out. But all that stuff is like verified into the blockchain, and it could be verified. And so the main thing about it is without a middleman. So if me and you're going to do a transaction and we do it through PayPal, if you screw me over, then PayPal is going to give me my money back, and then they're going to enforce the penalty on you and whatever cancel your account or freeze your money that you have in there. And so if there's no middleman, then I have to trust, like I have to either know you and trust that we're going to do the deal correctly, which if I'm doing internet deals and people all over the world, then most likely that's not going to happen. And so the thing that we're able to trust is we're able to trust math and code. And so I would rather trust math over a human any day.
Numbers don't lie.
Always the deterministic answer, and it always works the exact same way. And 1 + 1 is 2, and 2 + 2 is 4, and that's the same answer every time, unless you do some like Jedi tricks where you're. Well, never mind. Some smart people about that, but most cases those, and so math is always true. And humans, we can change our mind. We can do different things. Different things can happen. I can be in the middle of a transaction and get kidnapped, and the transaction won't finish. So there's all kinds of reasons why humans are wavering in our decisions. But with math, it's a little bit more concrete. And so I think that's the thing I like about Bitcoin is no one has to trust humans to follow the rules of not inflating their money and making people work harder just to maintain the value that they created in the past.
Is there, so at some point, and maybe you know this date, when the gold standard was introduced, at some point it was taken off the gold standard, right? And maybe way before then and during the gold standard days, everybody said the same thing that they're saying about Bitcoin. We won't come off this. It makes no sense. Why would we, not have something to base this currency off of, this store value? And if this has continued to happen throughout history, and it never works, but people keep doing the same thing over again, what would prohibit that from happening to Bitcoin as being the gold standard now? Bitcoin's the new gold standard, and 100 years from now, someone says, let's get off of that. And
if I can jump in just from my opinion, it's like, I guess the difference would be that it's those are all controlled by a third party or a government or a king or this or that, where this is not that. Like the U.S. government decided to go off the gold standard, not necessarily the people.
Right.
And so Bitcoin doesn't allow that. There is no person that's saying this is what Bitcoin is going to do or not do. It's everybody involved is just a part of it. That's how I would answer that.
Yeah, that's true. I agree. And so, yeah, I see what you're saying. So we had different things like currencies backed by something, and then they got not backed by something. And so the thing is, like, Bitcoin is to me, it's like a thing that just exists. So it just exists, and we have our opinions on it. We have our ways of using it, and however we use it and do different things with it, the thing stays the same. So Bitcoin stays the same. It's still, you can't inflate it. One person can't change it. You can't dilute the value that someone currently has. So that stays the same. And whatever I do as a human on the outside to it, or if I create something on the side, like if I'm the decision maker on that thing, like if I create Bitcoin backed dollars, then I can do that, create Bitcoin backed dollars, but I created it, so I can take those dollars away and take it off the Bitcoin standard. And now we have this Lamar dollars over here, but Bitcoin still exists.
That
And
would
so
be
how I
the
use Bitcoin, if I'm smart, would be to stay close as Bitcoin as possible rather than some synthetic derivatives of it. It's kind of like on the gold standard, it would have been better for me to have gold than the paper that represents the gold.
right. And this synthetic derivative, this would be an example of these stable coins that you mentioned were backed by Bitcoin.
Yeah, it could be the stable coins, or it could be whatever, like some kind of paper thing. But it just matters how it's built. And so it's not really, you can't really judge something until it's actually built and used. But it's pretty much impossible to create another Bitcoin, because it's like a long discussion on how it's possible technically, but it's not possible socially to create another Bitcoin, because all kinds of reasons. But if I did create something that was the next Bitcoin, then 5 people would buy all of it, and it wouldn't distribute properly, and that would be a big problem with it. And so yeah, but
It's great, man. Well, hey, dude, we'll have to do another session. I actually have I got to go get my kids.
no problem.
This is great, man. We could talk about this forever, and really do appreciate you coming on. We'd love to talk about it more, and I think there's a whole nother episode about like what you're doing and what we could be doing to kind of push this mission and this along for the movement. But man, appreciate you a lot.
All right, no problem. Hey, but one more thing, make sure you put this in there.
Yeah.
Is I like Bitcoin a lot, but I don't really have that much.
Okay.
So I wish I had like a ton more, but I have some for like experiments and stuff like that. But I don't really like hold Bitcoin that much. I have more than most people probably have, but it's all like just a small amount. And I wish I had a ton more, and I'm probably buy some more over time.
Cool, man. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate you, and we'll keep pushing forward, man. So hope you have a great day.
Thanks, Lamar.
All right, thank you guys. That was great.
Thanks, man. Take care.